a lot of TV work and a good deal of motion picture work. I was enormously blessed to have 3 spectacular sons. The oldest of which, my firstborn Zaki, was an absolutely remarkable, remarkable, remarkable child. Zaki was gifted with everything but the gift of years. He was a genius. He could light up a room the minute he walked in. He was handsome to the point of movie star handsome. He was brilliant, funny as could be, carried himself like an English lord. There was something absolutely regal about him. When he was 5 years old, I was doing a location scout for a picture that I was going to do in Israel, which eventually fell through. Zaki was born in 76, this was 81. So in 1981, you can imagine a long-distance call from Israel cost a lot of money. You could spend a couple $1,000 pretty easily back then there. So I would call every few days and check in with my then wife and kiss, hi to the kids, bye-bye. It was like a 45-second call. I'm alive, you're alive, all is good, see you in 3 weeks. And Zaki, my children called me Abba, which is dad in Hebrew. Zaki said, Abba, I made up a movie. I said, that's wonderful. I said, when I get home, I would love to hear about it. He said, no, I have to tell you now. Now, Zaki was a particularly loquacious 5-year-old. He was very talkative. There were no short stories in Zaki's world. I said, actually, sweet boy, you don't need to tell me now. It can wait till I get home. He said, no, I have to tell you now. I said, well, and I never talked to Zaki as if he were a child. He was always a little adult. I said, well, if you can explain to me exactly why it is that you have to tell me now, then you can tell me now. Otherwise, it needs to wait until I get back. He said, I'm 5 years old. I don't know how to write. By the time you get back, I will have forgotten it. And he used that tense, I will have forgotten it. I said, then you better tell me now. And he proceeded over the next 45 minutes to tell me the most beautiful children's story I'd ever heard in my life. When I got back to LA, I called my agent. I said, set a meeting at Amblin, which is Steven Spielberg's company. I said, I've got a movie they're going to buy. I went and pitched it to the woman who was head of development at that time at Amblin. Don't remember her name. She loved it. Came home, and I said, Zaki, Steven Spielberg has a company called Amblin. E.T., Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I said, they want to develop your movie. Whereupon Zaki said, cool. I said, cool indeed. I said, now let me tell you what the notes are. He said, what are notes? I said, notes are the changes that they want to make. He said, if they change it, it won't be my story anymore. I said, sweet boy, you're too young to have to learn this, but I'm going to tell you the cruel truth about the motion picture business. If we make the changes, they'll pay me a lot of money. I'll write the screenplay. They might make the movie. If we don't make the changes, they will not pay me a lot of money. I will not write the screenplay, and they will not make the movie. He said, but if they change it, it's not my movie anymore. I said, I'm going to tell you again. No changes, no money, no screenplay, no movie. That's the way it works. He said, what would you recommend that we do? I said, well, you're 5 years old. I think you have a long career ahead of you. We all eat it on our first script. That's the rule. I recommend that we make the changes. He said, okay, fine. You do that on one of your projects, not mine. I called my agent. I said, please inform Amblin that we have no deal. My partner refuses to make the changes. He said, what partner? What are you talking about? I said, my son. He said, he's 5 years old. I said, it's not my problem. He's 5 years old, but he owns the rights. He said, you got to be kidding me. I said, Jerry, I'm not kidding. I turned to Zaki. I said, when you're older, you and I will write this as a book, and we won't make any changes. And we shelved the project. Cut to, Zaki is now 16. I'm regaling someone with this tale. I don't remember who or what the occasion was. And Zaki pulled me over to the side very respectfully and said, Abba, let me ask you something. Is this actually true, or is this, because you embellish, which is a polite way of saying you're a BSer. I said, no, it's actually true. He said, we had a deal with Steven Spielberg. I said, yeah, we did. He said, and you blew it because of a 5-year-old? Are you out of your mind? You couldn't win. So, Zaki went on to an illustrious academic career. He graduated high school, was the salutatorian of his class, was the founding member of the Phi Beta Kappa Society, was the first exchange student to the then Soviet Union, received a letter from President Reagan congratulating him on that step, was admitted everywhere, literally everywhere, UCLA, USC, the Sorbonne, London Film School, NYU, and Columbia University, which were the best film schools in the world. And chose to go first to Columbia University because they have a classics program the first 2 years, and he wanted to steep himself in the classics. Didn't want to stay at Columbia because at Columbia they don't let you touch a camera till you're in the master's degree program. He wanted to start making movies right away. And his plan was 2 years at Columbia and then transfer into NYU. And he did. And I was always surprised because I didn't know he was my firstborn, so I had never had the experience before. I said, you know, I haven't received any report cards from the university. Well, who do I call there? He said, well, they don't send you the report cards. I said, well, they send me the bills. He said, no, but it's against the law. I said, well, that's the dumbest law I ever heard in my life. And I called the university and I said, there must be some mistake. I need to see what my kids' grades are. I'm paying the bills. And they said, it's against the law. I said, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard of in my life. I said, why don't you send him the bill, you know, instead of me? And they said, well, if he can pay for it, we'll be happy to. So I never saw any report cards. So I would ask Zaki, I would say, how are the grades? And he would say, well, what can I tell you? I would say, you could tell me how the grades are. And he would say, you know, I don't look at grades actually as an indication of what I've achieved in any given class. I said, really? What do you look at grades as being? He said, I look at grades as an indication of my professor's ability to judge wit, intelligence, thinking in an out-of-the-box fashion. Sometimes they disappoint me. What are you going to do? I said, so you're not going to tell me what the grades are? He said, not a chance. All right. He got accepted to NYU, so he hadn't flunked out of Columbia. He finishes up NYU. In the summer that he transitioned from Columbia to NYU, he wrote, co-produced, and directed his first feature film at the age of 20. We wrote the story he had come up with at the age of 5, and it was published by Delacorte in hardback and then later in softback and sold extraordinarily well. So by the age of 20, he was a published author in hardback and had done his first feature film. He never told any of his classmates. Never. None of them had any idea about it. When graduation came around, NYU's graduation is held in Washington Square. It's a zoo. There's thousands of kids. They're all wearing purple gowns. You can't find your kid. And you text or you phone your kid and say, I'll meet you at the drugstore on the corner of this and that. And I'm calling him and texting him, no answer. Yeah. The kid's got to answer. The graduation ceremony is about to start. No answer. I look in the graduation program because I want to see, there's an expression in Hebrew which is called nachat. In Yiddish it's called nachas. It doesn't exist in English. It means the pride that you take in someone else's accomplishment. And it's that which a parent has a good deal of if they're lucky. So this was a moment of nachat. I want to see my son's name amongst the lists of graduates from an illustrious university, NYU. And that's a long list. There's a lot of people graduating. There are 5,000 kids out there. And I go down, I see Gonzalez, Ginsberg, Giardelli, I don't see any Zaki Gordon there. Damn. And I call him again. He's not answering. And I go, he flunked out. You know, he's been living on my dime in an apartment in Greenwich Village across from the Blue Note, which isn't cheap. And he hasn't showed up because he knows I will kill him. And he's flunked out. And I'm getting really steamed. And I thought, wait a second, calm down. Maybe he graduated cum laude. So I look through the list, which is not an inconsiderable list of names, and I see Gonzalez and Greenberg and Gomez and this, and I don't see Gordon. And I'm going, the little SOB flunked out. I'm going to kill him. And I'm telling his brothers, you're about to lose a brother. And they go, ooh, he's mad. I thought maybe I'll look in the smaller column that has magna cum laude, which is impossible, but by now I'm desperate. He's not there. Now I'm going, that's it, it's over. Ceremony begins, and I am just sitting there absolutely fuming, and I glance down at the 4 names of the students who graduated summa cum laude. And Zaki's was first. And later I asked him, why didn't you tell me? And he said, Abba, it was never hard. It was just nothing to talk about. It was just never difficult. He was a remarkable young man. What I didn't know at that time was that I would have the pleasure of his company for another 6 months only. In December of that year, I was doing a motion picture called The Hurricane. When we had finished shooting in Toronto, we were shooting in New York. And Zaki, when he graduated, I said, why don't you come out to LA? There's no door that I can't open for you. You want to pitch the head of Universal? I've known her since she was somebody's assistant. You want to pitch Spielberg? That's a phone call. That's easy. You're a better writer than I am. You've just graduated from the most illustrious film school in the world. You've got the world by the short end. Come to LA. He said, that's why I'm going to stay in New York. Because he was determined to make it completely on his own and never mention his father's name. Ever. He was working as a production assistant on a film called Studio 54. It was an HBO film. And equidistant from his office and my office, there was a steakhouse. We would meet there at about midnight. Both of us were putting in long hours. And we would bitch and moan about the idiots we were working with. And I was not so stupid to not realize that life doesn't get any sweeter than that was. To be sitting there with your adult child, and who's the only one of my 3 sons who's gone into the same business as me. And therefore we share a secret language that I don't share with the other boys. And to see what a fine young man he's become. And one evening, which actually turned out to be the last conversation that we ever had of any length, he said, Abba, I made up a film school. And I said, Zaki, English is my first language, and I don't know what that sentence means. He said, well, they teach film the way they did in the, silent picture era when you went to school. He said, they haven't changed since 1969 when you graduated UCLA. He said, and I've come up with a different way of teaching film. And it was revolutionary. He said, the problem with the way they teach film is you start off in your first year, you get all your aesthetic courses. History of the American cinema, history of the European cinema, history of this, history of that, history of the other. All the aesthetics courses. Second year, you get all of your beginning craft courses, beginning editing, beginning camera, beginning directing, beginning this, beginning. You begin everything, you finish nothing. Third year, you do your first production courses. Maybe you make a 5-minute movie at the end of that year. And finally, in your fourth year, you make a 15-minute to 20-minute thesis film. He said the problem with that is by the time you get to that fourth year, you've forgotten everything you learned in the first year about all those movies you saw. So you're reinventing the wheel. He said there should only be one course. It should be called movies. And the way it should be taught is that on Monday, you watch a classic film that is selected by the instructor who should not be an academic. He or she should be a filmmaker. And that person is going to break down every single scene from the standpoint of screenplay and directing and tell the students the tricks that made that scene work, because there are tricks, there are formulae that make every scene work. He said, just the way you taught me screenwriting, which I did when he was 5 years old. He said, and it'll take about 8 hours to watch the movie that way. You have a group of 20 students, not more. At the end of those 8 hours, this teacher says, okay, you think you understand the formula of this particular scene. Take that formula home and beat for beat, write a 5-minute movie based on that formula. Don't reinvent the wheel. Do it just like a little 5-finger piano exercise. Beat for beat, duplicate the formula of a classic movie with one stricture, that it can't be on the same subject matter. So if you screen The Godfather, it can't be about Italian gangsters. On Tuesday, the students come in. They do pre-production. You pick 5 students out of the 20 to be directors. They're going to each work with 4-man crews. That's 20 kids. They get their locations, their costumes, their actors. And there are 2 people here, at least, Mr. Duvall and my assistant Zach, who I guess has left for a bit, who know about this because they lived through it. You get all your pre-production stuff, locations, logistics, where are the bathrooms, where's the electricity, who's going to supply the water, where's the food. If you're lucky, you get a rehearsal. He said, then you should be able to check out equipment at midnight, which we didn't quite do with the Zaki Institute, but pretty close. And the following day, Wednesday, you have 24 hours in which to shoot your movie. And then on Thursday, you come in with your footage and you show them to your editing instructor. And instead of editing and then getting a grade, you show the footage to the editing instructor who says, okay, you missed a close-up here, you didn't have a master shot here, you crossed the line there, here's how we're going to fix it. And then you do it and get a grade. And when this class is more advanced, the editing instructor says, well, you shot a drama, now we're going to edit a comedy. And then so you do your post-production Thursday and Friday, and then Friday night, you have a film festival of the films that you've shot, and you ask 2 questions. What did you learn, and what would you do differently? Those are the only 2 things that matter. And then Saturday and Sunday, you do seminars, and the seminars are screenwriting, Final Cut Pro, directing actors, directing camera, managing post-production, and guerrilla filmmaking. Literally, how do you make a micro-budget film? And you work the kids 7 days a week, because that's what making a feature is like. You give them absolutely no rest. You work them to the point of total exhaustion. And the ones who drop out are not meant to be filmmakers. And that way, your first semester, every student makes 5 5-minute films the first semester. That is more than an NYU MFA student does in 5 years. And your second semester, all classroom instruction stops, and it goes straight into production. Everybody is making their 20-minute thesis film. And you don't have to worry about instilling a work ethic, because if you foul up and don't report for work on your friend's film where you're supposed to crew, they're going to do the same to you. And the kids will learn very quickly a very strong work ethic. I said, it's brilliant. What are you going to do with it? That's the most revolutionary way of teaching film I've ever heard. What do you intend to do with it? He said, I don't know, I just gave it to you. I said, what am I supposed to do with it? He said, I have no idea. A week later, he ceased to exist on this plane. I have no doubt that there is life after life. I have no doubt that he and the big G pulled the strings on everything that was to follow. Absolutely no doubt. And I had a parent of a child at the school who was either Navajo or Hopi, I don't recall which. And he said, he was very kind to me. He came and he said, I want you to know that this was years later when we founded the school here, that amongst our people, when someone passes over, the connection between you is actually stronger. You actually work together with that person more than you did when they were on this earthly plane. I said, yeah, I know, but I appreciate you saying it. In the beginning, I had thought that I was going to do nothing but establish scholarships in Zaki's name that I would give out at various universities, which I did and do to this day. And the people who have won the Zaki Gordon Awards for excellence in screenwriting at UCLA, USC, Columbia University, Tel Aviv University, I mean, film schools all over the world, have gone on to win Academy Awards. And in their bios, they list Academy Award for this, and I was the honoree of the Zaki Gordon Award for Excellence in Screenwriting at such and such university. At Columbia University, which has the best writing program, I believe, in the world, it is the single most coveted prize, though it isn't the most money. It's interesting. At any rate, so that's what I thought I would do. 6 months after the accident that took Zaki's life, I'm on a plane going to Calgary, to the land of the Yiddish-speaking Russian Jewish cowboys. All the family that I have on my dad's side is all from Western Canada, and I'm going to my cousin's kid's wedding. And I'm sitting next to a woman, and usually I'm very untalkative on planes. I don't like to talk to people. Sometimes I put buds in my ear and just kind of go like this, like I'm listening to music, just so people won't talk to me. But for whatever reason, I was not a curmudgeon. I was sociable. And I said, why are you going to Calgary? She said, well, I want to see their cultural park. I said the same thing I had said to Zaki. I said, English is my first language, but I've never heard the expression, what's a cultural park? She said, well, we have one in Sedona, Arizona. We have an amphitheater, we have elder learning, we have this and that, we have these plans. And there was a building that was going to be an art gallery, but the county ran out of money, and I'm from the local community college. And we went to the community college and said, we want that building for our Sedona campus. And the city fathers said, we'll give you that building on condition that you give us something, because we're Sedona and we have to have exclusivity. We're, Sedona's hot stuff. And therefore, she said, we stupidly said, they said, we need something that doesn't exist at Verde Valley, at Prescott, at any other campus that you have. So she said, we stupidly said we'd give them a film school. She said, the problem is we don't know anything about film schools. We don't know why anybody would want to come to a film school that we'd have. So we're in a pickle. I said, I'll tell you exactly what it's going to be. It's going to be called the Zaki Gordon Institute for Independent Filmmaking. And I proceeded to pitch Zaki's vision to her. She says, this sounds spectacular. Can you be in Sedona in 2 weeks? I said, absolutely. Now, I had been to Sedona numbers of times because I had a ranch in Colorado at one time, and when we drive from LA to Four Corners area, which is where the ranch was, sometimes we'd stop in Sedona. So I had memories of being with Zaki in Sedona, so that was fine. And the president of the college at that time was Doreen Daly, and I went and met with her. This was in 2000. Hard to believe, 16 years ago. And I said, hi, I'm Dan Gordon. I see it means nothing to her. I said, I'm here to talk about the film school. Nobody's briefed her. I said, okay. Let me start from the beginning. My name's Dan Gordon. I'm here to talk about founding the Zaki Gordon Institute for Independent Filmmaking. She said, okay, we'll do it. I said, do you want to know what it is? She said, yeah. So I pitched it to her. She said, sounds great, we'll still do it. Now, I have a deep and abiding and well-founded, I might add, distrust of academia. I am not a fan of academia. They generally screw more things up than they don't. So I said, I'm going to make you a deal. I will finance the opening of this film school. You guys supply the building and the electricity. I'll buy all the equipment. I'll pay the teachers' salaries for 3 years. I intend for there only to be 1 or 2 teachers, so it's not going to be a lot of money. After 3 years, you guys have got to take it over, but I'll get you up and running for 3 years. On condition that you cannot change the curriculum, which is copywritten, without my written approval. 6 months of negotiations ensue, many times at which, and difficult negotiations. Anytime you deal with academia, it's difficult. And I would get up and say, I've had it, I'm out of here, and Doreen would pull me down and say, stop being an idiot, we're going to make this thing work. And but for Doreen Daly, I would have blown it. The school opened. 6 months after we opened, we're in business, she said, you know, you're a very odd person. I said, you're not the first to make that observation, but what tipped you off? She said, well, you've never asked me why I so readily agreed to establish the Zaki Gordon Institute for Independent Filmmaking. I said, obviously you're not in the motion picture business. I said, why would I want to talk you out of the deal? You said yes, that's all I care. The rule in motion picture business is the guy says yes, leave the room. Get out of town before they change their mind. You got a deal. I said, why on earth would I ask you why? She said, oh, okay, I get your point, but don't you think it's curious? I said, well, now that you mention it. So what's the story? So Doreen said that she was raised in Alaska in a family that had a number of challenges. And she said that for a girl like her, the highest thing she could have aspired to was to be a barmaid in Fairbanks. Then people would have said, you go, girl. She said, I wasn't smart enough to get an academic scholarship. I had no athletic skills, so I couldn't get an athletic scholarship. I didn't have enough money to go to college, and I was too poor to qualify for aid to go to college, so college was out. She said, and I had a mentor who paid my way through college and paid all the expenses. And when I graduated, said, you have a good mind, you should get an advanced degree, and paid for my master's degree. And I gather supplemented her all the way through her doctorate. She said, now I'm president of Yavapai College. We have whatever it is, 20-some-odd thousand students, 4 campuses. She said, and everything I have in life I owe to having had this mentor. I said, well, that's a very sweet story, but I don't see the connection between that and the Zaki Gordon Institute for Independent Filmmaking. She said his name was Zach Gordon. Now, if you try to calculate the odds on that journey, you'll go insane. That's tougher to calculate than the Fibonacci equation. So the school ran for 12 years here in Sedona, and it was a tale of brilliance, daring, boldness, creativity.